All right, so we're gonna have a chat about hiking shoes. We get asked all the time, you know, when I'm going out in nature, I'm on rocks, I'm on trails, don't I need thick cushioned boots with, you know, rigid heels, all this stuff. And so we've got Max here from Barefootinc to chat through it all. He's obviously a hiking and trail beast. He started Spartan Australia, and we're gonna explore it.
We often get asked this question about should you be wearing minimal shoes out on the trails where it is to some extent an unsafe environment, where you don't have as much control of what you're stepping on and what you're going to encounter. And the reality is, from my experience, the answer is unequivocally yes. And historically, we had no choice. If we were hiking up mountains or doing extreme terrain, we had to have shoes that had traction and that gave us protection. And that by default meant a stiff hiking boot, because there was nothing else. But now we need to use the tools that become available to us as technology and innovation expands. And I feel like a lot of people are still stuck in this, a hiking boot is the best thing for me. While now we have companies like Vibram, like Vivo, like Zero, who are creating shoes that are made for the outdoors, have great traction, have great protection through the soles so that you can't get punctured by rocks or sharps, and that give you great grip. The big difference is your whole experience of how you experience the outdoors changes fundamentally, because suddenly you're connected. You're not locked into this kind of cast, which is protecting you from this hazardous environment. Suddenly it becomes a playground.
Yeah.
And we've done it. We just ran about 5 or 6K through this beautiful Budai National Park, and you're playing on rocks, you're instinctively connecting, and you no longer feel unsafe. And I think that's what all of us should be trying to get to.
For sure. It's such a sensually rich, you get a lot more sensation through the feet. And in that sense, I kind of liken it to, you know, a beautiful sunrise, for example. But if you're wearing these really dark sunglasses, you're just not getting the full beauty of that. And the feet are sensors as well, and you can take in a lot of sensory information through there. And then once you wear something like this, you have the protection, but you still feel a lot on the ground. It becomes a much more rich experience that is more enjoyable.
Absolutely. And of course, it's something that we have to build in. So all of us are used to wearing shoes that are probably a little overprotective, even on quite simple terrain. So, you know, this is something where, you know, we might start with a slightly more flexible shoe, or we might go to a park, we might go to a beach, we might play on some rocks where we feel reasonably safe and capable, and then build up until obviously we have all been wearing minimal shoes for some time, and so we're able to really push a little bit hard on rocky trails, climbing trees, and really fully experience it. But there is no question in my mind, this is how we're designed to experience nature. And when people talk about their enjoyment of nature, when we do get them into minimal shoes, when we do get them kind of not only moving through this beautiful environment, but actually starting to feel it's not just a connection, the earth wants to massage you. You know, all those kind of nerve endings through the soles of our feet. Like, nature actually wants to get in there and connect with you on a whole different level once we're able to actually feel all of that. And it's only possible in these shoes. And of course, look, I'm biased. I think being able to move those toes, you know, somebody told me, I think it might have been you, that every toe has its own story, wants to move in its own way if you let it. They're not designed to move uniformly. Every little toe is actually doing its own thing. Once you allow those to actually move the way they're supposed to, especially in this kind of terrain, suddenly you realize this is how it's supposed to be. You know, this is my capability.
Absolutely.
I love it.
And that's the piece about adaptability. Like, our toes are supposed to be able to move individually to adapt to the ground. All of the 33 joints in our feet are supposed to be able to move and accommodate different surfaces, different textures. And that's actually a safety piece. If you can't adapt well to the ground, then your movement options are limited, and then you're much more likely to trip, you're much more likely to fall. So you can't feel the ground through this thick, rigid sole, and you can't adapt to the ground, then yeah, maybe you are slightly have a slightly less risk of injuring your feet, but then the rest of your body is in more danger. And also you just have far less options in terms of what you can explore. Like I wouldn't have been scaling up or down those rocks with big, thick hiking boots.
Definitely not.
But I felt really confident in Vibrams, and whenever I go to any kind of hike, or especially up some kind of mountain, I see people, I'm just breezing past people who are in these big, thick hiking boots and taking it really slowly because they can't feel and they can't adapt. And I'm just streaming past them because I have the sensation, I have the adaptability on the ground.
Yeah, but that's also because you're a young, athletic, no, but honestly, but you're a young, fit, super athletic guy. I'm a little bit older. One thing from my generation side, one thing that is so important is that it's not about running. Yeah, I mean, he's a weapon. It's great. And look, and you know, like, and of course, running is amazing. But to me, what is really cool about moving, and Mac, who's filming, just did what we did in 5 Fingers Barefoot, which is amazing. And what is really important is our lives are normally too fast. Yeah, everything happens too quickly. There's too much caffeine in us, and we're trying to do too much. One absolutely amazing gift that is almost, I overlook sometimes, is that when you tell people to get into a more flexible, natural shoe and to go walking in nature, it actually slows us down. And that's actually a gift, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, and the funny thing is, it doesn't feel slow because there's so much more information coming back through our solar feet. We're actually quite happy to smell the roses. But even going completely barefoot, when I worked as a running coach, I purposely didn't even give them 5 fingers in the first place. I would take their shoes off and say, now run barefoot. And suddenly they would slow down and their runs would become hundreds of meters rather than kilometers. But how they did it and what they got out of it completely, you know, kind of like, you know, became exponentially more. So, so slowing down and moving in nature naturally, which means you have to be aware of where you're putting your feet, which obviously when you're barefoot is the ultimate kind of expression of that, is that suddenly you are absolutely connected and you're not rushing. And that's a good thing.
Agreed. So what do you reckon about ankle support? That's obviously a big thing in this sort of hiking boot world with these high top boots, and everyone feels like they need to support their ankles. What's your take on that?
I think ankle support is vital if you're wearing a boot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're wearing a boot which is stiff, which means when you stand on a rock, you actually become totally unstable because you cannot assimilate the different planes that rock is forcing you into. Suddenly you're unstable. It's a very likely that you're going to roll off. You can't feel what's under your foot. You better have ankle support, 100%. I would hope people were in a full body cast because there's a good chance you're going to lose your balance.
Yeah.
So that's why with that ankle support, quite literally holding your ankle, with a little bit of movement, it's going to keep you upright. It's like Subutio. Remember the soccer where the players kept bouncing back up?
Yeah.
You know, because they had like a kind of molded base. So that's the idea. The ankle support is there to keep you from losing your balance on these little uneven surfaces. But if you really topple, then it becomes a negative because as you go, it's actually more likely to make it worse. So my point is, once you take your shoes off or once you go into a more sensory, flexible, zero drop, proprioceptive shoe, you don't need ankle support because we are designed to move with our arches and our feet able to adapt, able to flex, and they're beautifully capable of doing so. I just came back from a hike. I'm 52 years old. I've had a spur in this ankle. I have really terrible ankle mobility. Like actually before muscle activation, 0 degrees in this ankle. I've got, you know, whatever. I think you're supposed to have, is it 18 or 28? Yeah. Anyway, but like, so I've got great ankle flexion on the left, 0 on the right before muscle activation, but I'm still much better off feeling that and my body working it out. You know, like nobody's perfect. I'm not. I mean, you're pretty fit and you're young, but when you get to this age, I'm not perfect. But I cannot imagine hiking. I'm hiking with a 52 kilo pack on really uneven, off-grid terrain, and my poor ankle is still far better off and does a really good job and gets me there and back safely in this shoe.
And the other piece on that is the ankle you know, it obviously has a movement function, but it's also a sensor in itself. So it kind of acts like a
Absolutely,
gyroscope.
yes.
The position of your ankle, the angle of the ankle will give your brain feedback about how you have to move your hips or trunk or whatever to adapt to that position on the ground. So if you've got a big cast around your ankle with a high top hiking boot, then you don't get that sensory information, and again you lose more of that adaptability.
Yeah, it's like having noise cancelling headphones on and then trying to listen for the birds in the trees. You can't do it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Max, from your experience and perspective, what's the highest priority for people to look for in a shoe that they're taking on a hike or a trail?
Well, we know there's a bunch of factors, but for me, the most important thing that any outdoor shoe needs to have is protection, meaning the sole itself has to be able to give you some protection from sharps, and of course some traction as well. So, you know, there's some shoes that just simply don't do that, you know. The second thing for me would be flexibility, because that's where your foot is actually, because the terrain is uneven, the foot has to be able to adapt to uneven terrain and to feel. So, and that's where you can start to scale that down, and there's some great options out there, obviously culminating in Barefoot or something like 5 Fingers, but there's a whole bunch of stuff in between, you know, and it's about keeping that loading and that kind of progressive loading positive by just, you know, not having an ego and obviously allowing yourself time. And time is so important in kind of shifting across, right? An absolute given for me is zero drop. Yeah, but that again, if somebody's used to walking in high-heeled, you know, high-stacked shoes, and you go to a zero-drop shoe, you're going to actually overload your calves as well. So then you have a choice of reducing time on your feet. In other words, your hikes become shorter and easier, and then you build it back up, or you progress your shoe. Either way, you know. Yeah, and then I think once you have the flexibility, once you have a shoe that's zero drop, and still gives you protection. And then the final kind of expression of Barefoot is going to be actually having something that allows you to widen your feet. And that's where a foot-shaped shoe, it seems obvious, but a foot-shaped shoe is a given, because otherwise your toes are being pushed into a completely different shape and you're going to experience things very differently. Of course, having a shoe that has separate toes, I know it's not everybody's thing. I mean, but there's no question that it allows us to move and feel and kind of articulate our feet in the way that you would want to articulate your hand if you were experiencing something for the first time. So, but definitely having a shoe that doesn't push your toes together is super important, no matter what you're doing.
And you've touched on it there, talking about how you need to meet your body where it's at, meet your feet where they're at. You can't just switch straight to a fully, you know, natural shoe with all of those characteristics and do the exact same amount of volume or intensity that you have been doing. And one way to gradually build up would just be to get out in, you know, nature or on the trails very frequently and build up, you know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and so on. But if you don't have access to do that and you want to accelerate the process while you're at home, that's exactly what our training systems are designed for.
100%.
We go through all of the different elements of foot function, from big toe mobility, midfoot mobility, arch control, balance, ankle mobility. We have all of these tutorials available for free, and that way you can sort of prepare yourself at home. Maybe use some of the tools that we've got as well to simulate and supplement some of the uneven surfaces that you find in nature. But either way, you can prepare yourself at home, so then when you do go out, you can get more out of your time in nature and you can enjoy it more with less chance of injury.
And 100%, the Soulmate, which obviously I was very happy to get from you, like that has a huge impact on my confidence, skipping and running and balancing on tree trunks and rocks, purely because of that training and retraining ankles and feet to actually, you know, feel comfortable and confident on those surfaces. So if you don't have access to a national park around the corner, doing the kind of training that you guys do on things like the Soulmate with the hacky sack, it's invaluable. And it's an investment into coming and really maximizing your time here.
Absolutely.
We've been around almost 20 years, and it was really, you know, everything happens for a reason and often happens to you rather than because of you. I was working as a running coach, And I came to barefoot running as a way to improve my knees because I was getting some knee pain after, years of sport. And I came to barefoot running through somewhat through my experiences in Africa, but also because it was a way of taking the stress off the knees and improving how I ran. And then when the 5 fingers came out, it was love at first sight. So we've been sourcing and kind of selling and wearing minimal shoes, and we've been really lucky to be here for 20 years and really see the kind of minimal natural shoe market grow and become a real community. You guys, obviously, both here and in the US, have been a huge part of that. And it's just really exciting that we're still going. So Barefootinc is now going to be 20 years old next year, from from a tiny little shop in our living room, we're now able to connect with a lot of people, and even now, every day getting phone calls from people saying, I just got my first pair of 5 fingers, I just got my first pair of Zeros or Vivos or Earth Runners or Lunar sandals. There's so much out there, and it's all great. Anyone who's moving towards better foot health, towards more connection with nature, with self, and with community, that's all we can hope for, right? Yeah.
So if you're in Australia and you want to get a pair of barefoot shoes, Vibrams are my go-to, they're my favorite. I wear them for pretty much everything these days, and even if you don't want Vibrams, they've got a bunch of other stock on Barefootinc, so make sure you go check them out, and we hope to see you on the trails sometime.